Looking now across the state, lawmakers working on a bill that'll make it not only easier to prosecute human smugglers, but make their crime a felony offense. State Senator Chuy Hinojosa wants Senate Bill 576 to eventually be signed into law. He's hoping the increased penalties will dissuade human smugglers from continuing in Texas. Lately, there's been an epidemic of bailouts and immigrants left to die in the brush out in places like Brooks and Refugio counties. Several law enforcement officials are asking for any and all help to stop human smuggling.
On the new legislation that I introduced and got voted out of the Criminal Justice Committee on the Senate side, it makes it much easier to prosecute and convict smugglers. So we try to find ways to help.
Claiborne County District Attorney John Hebert says that his bill, or this particular bill, would make it easier to prosecute smugglers because prosecutors won't have to prove the financial agreement between the smuggler and the immigrant. He tells 3 News the bill would also give Homeland Security officers the powers of a special investigator, so they would finally have the ability to not only arrest a human smuggler in the state of Texas, but to file felony charges against them.